There will be everywhere. It's not a conversation that I would necessarily have. I think it's in it perfectly true that it is a moment where you need to have that discussion. For generations, the royal family's bloodline has been seen as pure, sacred, and unshakable. But now, one DNA test has turned the entire monarchy upside down. According to leaked reports, the results reveal a truth so shocking that palace insiders are scrambling to contain the fallout. Whispers of illegitimacy, hidden relationships, and buried secrets are spreading like wildfire. What began as a quiet investigation has now become a royal nightmare. One that could rewrite everything we thought we knew about the family's lineage. The question everyone's asking, who really carries the royal blood? What started it all? It was an ordinary day, just like any other day at the palace. A young woman who worked in housekeeping was polishing the wooden panels in the main corridor. She had been doing this job for 2 years and knew the daily routine well. The palace was usually quiet at this hour, with most of the family still having breakfast in their private rooms. She moved slowly down the hallway, making sure every surface gleamed perfectly. Then she heard voices. 2 senior aides were standing near a doorway, speaking in low tones. They looked nervous and kept glancing around. The housekeeper slowed down her work, pretending to focus on a difficult spot on the wall. She wasn't trying to spy, but their worried faces made her curious. She caught a few words, test results, and absolutely confidential, and this could be serious. After one of them noticed her, they quickly walked away in different directions. The housekeeper was confused. What kind of test results needed such secrecy? She thought maybe someone in the family was sick. That would explain the worried looks and the hushed conversation. She finished her work and went down to the staff dining room for lunch. 3 of her co-workers were already there eating sandwiches and talking about their morning tasks. She couldn't help herself, so she told them what she had seen and heard. The others listened carefully. An older cook who had worked at the palace for 15 years said it might be about someone's health. Maybe one of the senior royals was ill, and they wanted to keep it private. Another person suggested it could be something to do with security, but nobody really knew. They all agreed it seemed important, whatever it was. By the next day, the story had spread. A staff member said she saw a man in a dark suit arrive early in the morning with a locked briefcase. He went straight to a private office and stayed there for over an hour. The palace had always been full of secrets. Staff members were used to seeing strange things and keeping quiet about them. That was part of the job, but this felt different. There was tension in the air that hadn't been there before. By the end of the week, even the senior staff were acting strangely. Some of them were called into meetings and asked to sign new confidentiality papers. This was unusual because they had already signed such papers when they started working at the palace. Why did they need to sign more now? Nobody explained, and nobody dared to ask too many questions. Certain rooms suddenly became off-limits. Doors that were normally open now had guards standing outside them. When staff members asked why, they were told it was temporary and given no other information. The head housekeeper, who usually knew everything that happened in the palace, seemed as confused as everyone else. Rumors began spreading to other parts of the palace. The people who worked in the administrative offices started whispering during their coffee breaks. Someone said they had seen important documents being shredded. Another person mentioned phone calls being made at odd hours from the secure telephone lines. These were the phones used only for very serious matters. The assistant secretaries noticed that their bosses seemed stressed and distracted. Requests that would normally be handled quickly were being delayed. Meetings were being canceled without explanation. One secretary said her supervisor had snapped at her over a tiny mistake, which was completely unlike him. Everyone could feel that something big was happening, but nobody knew what it was. In the staff quarters, people talked late into the night. They tried to put the pieces together like a puzzle. The mysterious man with the briefcase, the test results that needed to be kept secret, the new confidentiality agreements, the closed rooms and extra guards. What did it all mean? Some thought it was about money or financial problems. Few still believed someone was seriously ill. Others wondered if it might be some kind of investigation. Small talks between staff turned into anxious murmurs among senior aides. People started being careful about what they said and where they said it. Trust was becoming complicated. If there was a big secret, who knew about it? Who could be trusted to be silent? The uncertainty made everyone uncomfortable. Something unusual was happening behind closed doors, and no one could tell where it would lead. The whisper that had started with two nervous aides in a hallway had now spread throughout the entire palace. Everyone was talking about it. They all felt that they were standing on the edge of something significant, something that might change everything. But what it was and when it would be revealed remained a mystery that kept everyone awake at night, wondering and worrying about what would happen next. A secret investigation. 3 months before any rumors started, Queen Camilla began having doubts. It started late one evening in the palace library. She was looking through old family photo albums, something she'd done many times before. But this time, something caught their attention. The dates written under some photographs didn't quite match the stories that had been told over the years. At first, it seemed like a small thing. Maybe someone had written the wrong date. Maybe the stories had gotten mixed up over time. Families always had little errors in their histories, but the more she looked, the more things seemed wrong. Birth dates and event dates didn't line up properly. People who were supposed to be in certain places at certain times couldn't have been there based on other records. The doubts grew stronger each day. Camilla started having trouble sleeping. She would lie awake at night, thinking about what these small inconsistencies might mean. After 2 weeks of silent worry, she realized she needed answers, but this wasn't something that could be discussed openly. If the doubts were wrong, bringing them up would cause unnecessary upset. If the doubts were right, the consequences could be devastating. A decision was made to find out the truth quietly. During one of her sleepless nights, Camilla thought carefully about who could be trusted. Finally, she chose an aide who had worked for the household for over 30 years. This aide had always been loyal and discreet. More importantly, this aide understood how serious matters needed to be handled with complete privacy. They met in a garden far from the main palace buildings. No security cameras reached that spot. It was early morning, and mist still hung in the air. Camilla explained her concerns carefully, including the dates that didn't match and the stories that seemed impossible. She couldn't shake off the feeling that something in the family history wasn't true. The aide listened without interrupting, their face becoming more serious with each detail. When Camilla finished talking, there was a long silence. The aide understood immediately how dangerous this situation could become. If these doubts led to real discoveries, it could shake the foundations of everything the monarchy represented. But the aide also understood that doubt once planted doesn't go away. It grows until it's answered. So they agreed that proper testing needed to be done, but everything had to remain absolutely secret. The aide knew a medical professional who worked with wealthy and powerful families. This doctor had a reputation for complete discretion. Rich people and famous people used this doctor when they needed private medical care that would never appear in any records. The aide made contact using a phone that couldn't be traced back to the palace. A meeting was arranged at a private clinic in a quiet part of the city. The clinic didn't look special from the outside. It was just another medical building on a street with many offices, but inside it offered services for people who needed complete privacy. Camilla went there alone, wearing ordinary clothes and sunglasses. She arrived in an unmarked car that wasn't registered to the royal household. The doctor explained everything in simple, clear terms. Samples would be collected, just simple swabs from inside the mouth. These samples would be sent to a laboratory, but they would be labeled with false names. Nobody at the laboratory would know they were testing a member of the royal family. The results would be out in 2 weeks. They would be delivered in person in a sealed envelope with no copies made. Payment would be in cash, so there would be no bank records. The doctor also gave a warning. Once the tests were done and the results came back, there would be no way to erase what was learned. The truth, whatever it was, would have to be faced. Camilla sat quietly for a moment, thinking about this warning. Then she nodded and agreed to proceed. She handed over the samples she had collected and left the clinic the same way she had arrived, secretly and unseen. Those 2 weeks were the longest of her life. Every day felt like a week. Every night brought bad dreams about what the results might show. But life had to continue normally. There were official duties to perform, public events to attend, photographs to smile for. Camilla performed all her duties while carrying a secret that felt like a heavy stone in their chest. But just having someone else who knew about the situation made it slightly easier to bear. Other family members noticed that something was wrong. They could see the stress and the tiredness, but when they asked if everything was all right, they were told it was just the usual pressures of royal duties. Nobody suspected that a secret investigation was happening. Nobody imagined that DNA samples were being analyzed in a laboratory somewhere across the city. Finally, the day came when the results were ready. The doctor called the aide on a secure phone line. The message was brief: "We need to meet immediately." The aide's heart sank. Those words could only mean one thing. Something real had been discovered. That evening, the aide drove alone to collect the envelope. The doctor handed it over with a serious expression, but said nothing. There was nothing to say. Whatever was in that envelope would speak for itself. The aide drove back to the palace. The envelope, once she arrived, she went straight to Camilla's private chambers, entering through a side door where she wouldn't be seen. The envelope sat on the table between them. For several minutes, neither of them moved to open it. They both knew that once it was opened, everything would change. The truth was now in their hands, and whatever happened next, nothing would ever be the same again. The unexpected discovery. After sitting in silence for a long time, Camilla reached out and broke the seal. The papers slid out, covered with technical terms and scientific language. She read slowly, trying to understand what all the numbers and percentages meant. The aide stood nearby, hands clasped tightly, barely breathing. After several minutes of silence, Camilla looked up. Her face had gone pale. "This can't be right," she whispered. "There must be some kind of mistake." But there was no mistake. The report included 3 separate tests, all done on the same samples. Every test showed the same result. The genetic markers didn't match what they were supposed to match. The family tree that hung in the palace gallery, showing hundreds of years of royal lineage, was wrong at a crucial point. Not just slightly wrong, fundamentally wrong. The aide sat down heavily, feeling dizzy. She asked to see the report herself. She read through it carefully, hoping to find something that would make it less terrible. Maybe the samples had been mixed up. Maybe the laboratory had made an error, but the report was very clear. Multiple checks had been done specifically to avoid mistakes. The conclusion was certain. The bloodline was not what everyone believed it to be. The family members started asking questions out loud, not really expecting answers. How could this have happened? When did it happen? Did someone in a previous generation know about this and hide it? Or was it a secret that had been lost over time? The questions came faster. What would this mean for the current family? What would it mean for the monarchy? What would it mean for the country? The report included detailed genetic information and comparison charts. It showed clearly where the DNA diverged from what was expected. Camilla realized that this wasn't just about one person. If this test was correct, it meant that generations of people had believed a lie. Ceremonies had been held based on that lie. Laws had been written based on it. History books had been written based on it. The results came back with details no one expected. What made it worse was thinking about all the official records, birth certificates showing royal parentage, documents establishing succession rights, even the titles that people carried, all based on bloodline that this test now questioned. Camilla slowly walked over to the window and looked out at the palace grounds, trying to process what this meant. The aide suggested that maybe one more test should be done just to be absolutely certain, maybe using a different laboratory. Camilla shook her head. The doctor had been very clear that these tests were highly accurate. Doing another test would only expand the circle of people who might learn the secret. And besides, deep down, they both knew the results were true. It explained too many small things that had never quite made sense. They talked about what to do next. The aide thought another senior family member should be told, someone who could help carry the weight of this knowledge and help decide what to do. But Camilla wasn't sure who that should be. Trust had suddenly become fragile. If someone in the past had hidden this truth, could it happen again? What if telling the wrong person meant the secret would spread before they were ready? Hours passed. The two of them sat in that room as daylight faded and evening came. Neither of them wanted to leave, as if staying in that room could somehow contain the truth within its walls. They discussed destroying the report and pretending the test had never happened, but they both knew that was impossible. You can't delete something from your memory once you know it. The doubt would always remain. The findings didn't just question personal ties. They threatened royal lineage itself. One revelation could change everything the monarchy stood for. The legitimacy wasn't just about genetics. They knew that. It was about law and tradition and public acceptance. But would the public continue to accept a monarchy if they learned the bloodline wasn't what they'd been told? Would Parliament continue to support them? As night settled completely over the palace, Camilla made a decision. She carefully put the papers back in the envelope and locked it in their private safe. Only 2 people in the world knew what was in that safe. She looked at the aide and spoke with determination. No one else can know about this yet. We need time to think about what comes next. The aide nodded in agreement, but both of them understood the truth. Time was not really on their side. Secrets this big had a way of finding the light, no matter how carefully they were hidden. And every day that passed without dealing with the truth was another day of living a lie. They left that room separately, each carrying the weight of knowledge that felt too heavy to bear alone, knowing that soon, very soon, they would have to share this burden with others and face whatever consequences followed. Confrontation behind closed doors. 5 days passed, 5 days of carrying the secret alone. Camilla, knowing the truth, barely slept during those nights. Finally, she decided that someone else had to be told. Prince William was the obvious choice. He was next in line after his father. He was known for staying calm in difficult situations. And whatever this truth meant for the family, it would affect him directly. A private meeting was requested. No staff, no secretaries, no official record of the meeting. They met in a small study room that was rarely used. It was on the 3rd floor, far from the busy corridors where people might accidentally overhear. Prince William arrived thinking this was about some routine family business, maybe a disagreement about schedules or duties. He was unprepared for what actually happened. The envelope was placed in his hands. At first, there was confusion on his face, but as he opened it and started reading, his expression changed as he moved through the pages. There was disbelief, then something close to anger. He read some sections twice, making sure he understood correctly. When he finished, he set the papers down on the table, carefully, as if they might explode. After trying to make sense of what he had read, he looked up and asked the obvious question. "How long have you known about this?" The answer, 5 days, made him shake his head. 5 days of keeping this hidden, even from him. Prince William stood up and walked around the small room. He asked about who else knew. It was just 3 people now, including him. He asked what the plan was. There was no plan yet. That's why he was being told. They needed to decide together what to do next. They talked for over an hour. Prince William wanted to know every single detail. Where was the test done? How was it done? Could there be any errors? The answers he received made it clear that this was solid evidence. Multiple samples, multiple tests, proper laboratory procedures. There was no mistake. The family history they had both been taught since childhood was wrong at a fundamental level. The conversation turned to King Charles. Prince William believed his father needed to know immediately. This wasn't something that could be kept in a small group anymore. Charles was the king. He had a right to know, and he would need to be part of any decisions. Camilla agreed reluctantly. Every person who learned the secret made it bigger and harder to control. But William was right. Charles had to know. 2 days later, another meeting was arranged, this time in the same study room, but with 3 people. King Charles entered looking tired. He had been told the meeting was urgent and private, but he didn't know why. When he was handed the report, he put on his reading glasses and began to read. The room was completely silent, except for the sound of pages turning. Charles read through everything slowly. His face became more troubled with each page. When he finished, he carefully removed his glasses and placed them on the table. He set the report down next to them. For a long moment, he didn't speak. He just sat there staring at nothing, thinking. The weight of being king had never felt heavier than in that moment. The room was silent because everyone understood. This wasn't just a family matter. This was about an institution that had existed for over 1,000 years. King Charles finally insisted that Princess Anne needed to know. He wanted her advice and support. She was known for being practical and sensible. After being told everything, her response was to ask very specific questions. She needed to know how far back the problem went, if it was one generation or multiple, and what records existed that might help them understand when and how this happened. She wanted facts and details before making decisions. They all spent hours discussing family history. The atmosphere grew heavy as they tried to understand how this could happen. Someone suggested that perhaps even Queen Elizabeth herself had known. That thought made everyone fall silent. Could it be possible that the previous queen, so dedicated to duty and tradition, had known about this and chosen to hide it? Or had she been kept in the dark too? They would never know for certain. The weight of generations pressed on them, and the room felt smaller with every word spoken. Princess Anne pointed out something important. They were not just dealing with a family secret. This was about history, about the Constitution, about an institution that millions of people believed in. Each person in that room carried a title that meant something to the nation. Now those titles felt uncertain. King Charles listened to all of it. He was the one who would have to make the final decision, keep the secret or reveal the truth. Both choices seemed impossible. Both choices led to terrible consequences. He rubbed his face with his hands, suddenly looking much older than his years. The confrontation behind closed doors had revealed the truth to the people who mattered most, but it had not revealed any easy solutions to the crisis they now faced together. The media threat and damage control. 3 weeks after the family meeting, something happened that everyone had feared. A junior staff member who worked in the palace press office noticed unusual activity. She was filing routine paperwork when she heard her boss, the senior press secretary, on the phone. The press secretary's voice was urgent. After the call ended, the press secretary immediately called 2 other communications officials into her office for an emergency meeting. The junior staff member couldn't hear what was being discussed, but she saw their faces through the glass door. They all looked worried and serious. After 30 minutes, they came out and started making more phone calls. Something was clearly wrong. The junior staff member went back to her work, but she kept watching. The press office, normally calm and organized, suddenly felt like a place in crisis. That same afternoon, across the city, a journalist at a major newspaper was checking his email. He saw a message from an address he didn't recognize. The subject line said, "Royal Family Secret." He almost deleted it as spam, but something made him open it. The message was short. The royal family is hiding DNA test results that prove their bloodline is not what they claim. Ask them about the secret investigation conducted 3 months ago. The journalist stared at his screen. There was no proof attached, no documents, no evidence, just that one claim. It could be nothing. It could be from someone with a conspiracy theory or a grudge against the royals. But it could also be the biggest story in decades. He saved the email and walked over to his editor's desk. The editor read the email, and they talked in low voices about what to do. Publishing a story based on an anonymous tip with no evidence would be irresponsible. It could lead to serious legal problems. The palace lawyers were known to be aggressive when protecting the family's reputation. But completely ignoring the tip also felt wrong. If there was even a small chance it was true, they needed to investigate. They decided to start making careful inquiries. The journalist started calling his contacts who had connections to the palace. He didn't mention the email directly. He just asked general questions. Had they heard any unusual rumors? Was anything strange happening inside the royal household? The responses were interesting. Several contacts said yes. They had noticed something odd. The palace staff seemed nervous lately. There had been unexplained meetings and sudden changes to procedures. Within hours, the palace press office found out that journalists were asking questions. One of their trusted media contacts called to give a warning. Reporters from at least 2 newspapers were making inquiries about DNA tests and questions about royal bloodline. The press secretary felt panic rising in her chest. This was exactly what the family had feared. Somehow information had leaked out. She immediately called the senior aide, who had been involved from the beginning. Together, they went to inform the family members who knew the truth. Another emergency meeting was called. King Charles was furious. He wanted to know how the secret had gotten out. Everyone who knew had promised absolute silence, yet somehow information had reached the media. Prince William thought it might be someone from the medical clinic where the testing was done. Princess Anne wondered if a staff member had noticed suspicious activity and figured things out. Queen Camilla suggested it could be anyone. Too many people had been involved at different stages. Nobody knew for sure, but the damage was already happening. The secret was escaping their control. By the next morning, 3 different newspapers were making official inquiries through the palace press office. The press secretary drafted responses. She wrote careful statements that didn't exactly deny anything, but didn't confirm anything either. She stated that the palace does not comment on private family matters, and that the rumors were baseless speculation. But she knew these statements wouldn't satisfy serious journalists for long. They would keep digging. Newsrooms buzzed with questions, while editors debated whether to go public. Some editors thought the story was too thin to publish without concrete evidence. Publishing rumors about the royal family without proof was dangerous. Others argued that the palace's nervous reaction was itself newsworthy. Why were they so defensive if there was nothing to hide? The family acted fast. Official statements were drafted and redrafted. Lawyers were brought in to review everything and to send warning letters to newspaper editors. The letters reminded them about privacy laws and defamation laws. The letters warned about the serious consequences of publishing false information about the royal family. Some newspapers became more cautious after receiving these letters. Others became more determined to find the truth. The palace communications team reached out to friendly journalists. They tried to plant different stories that would distract attention. Stories about royal charity work and upcoming events. Positive stories about family members doing good things. Anything to push the DNA rumors off the front pages. While some journalists cooperated, others resisted, sensing that the palace was trying too hard to change the subject. Every appearance was carefully planned to hide the growing cracks within. Every gesture, every smile, every word was calculated to suggest that nothing was wrong, that the family was united and confident, that any rumors were nonsense. But the tension behind palace walls could no longer be disguised. Staff members who once worked together smoothly now eyed each other with suspicion. Nerves were frayed. Everyone was exhausted from the constant stress of maintaining the lie. The atmosphere had changed from worry to paranoia. Security measures were increased. Phone calls were strictly monitored. Staff members were reminded repeatedly about their confidentiality agreements. Anyone who seemed too curious or asked too many questions was watched closely. The palace now felt like a place under siege. The media was closing in, and everyone inside knew it was only a matter of time before the questions became too loud and too persistent to ignore the rift within the family. The media pressure created new problems inside the family. These problems were different from dealing with journalists. These were personal. During a family dinner one evening, the conversation turned into an argument that revealed deep divisions. The aide spoke first. She said they should just tell the truth, face whatever happened, and deal with the outcome. She explained that lying would only make things worse when the truth eventually came out. Prince William strongly disagreed. He raised his voice, which was unusual for him. He said that protecting the monarchy was more important than satisfying public curiosity. The institution mattered more than one genetic test. They had a duty to preserve it, not destroy it by admitting uncomfortable truths. The argument between 2 of them grew heated. Old tensions from previous conflicts began surfacing again. King Charles tried to mediate. He spoke calmly, trying to get both individuals to lower their voices, but he was torn by his own doubts. As king, he felt responsible for an institution bigger than any person. He understood the need to protect it, but he also understood the AIDS point. Deception could destroy trust more completely than truth ever would. He didn't know which path was right. Queen Camilla had been quiet during most of the argument. When she finally spoke, she sided with William. The monarchy's survival had to be the priority. If that meant keeping secrets, then secrets should be kept. Institutions sometimes needed protection, even from uncomfortable truths. Her words made the aide even more frustrated. The discovery didn't just threaten their image, it tore the family apart from within. Princess Anne had a different perspective. She believed they needed to understand the full historical situation before making any decisions. She suggested commissioning independent historical research. They needed to know exactly when and how the bloodline diverged from official records. They were making huge decisions based on one test, but they didn't understand the complete picture. Her suggestion made sense, but others were frustrated by it. Prince William said there was no time for academic research. Journalists were asking questions now. They needed to make decisions now, not wait for historians to spend months studying old records. Princess Anne replied that making wrong decisions quickly was worse than making right decisions slowly. The argument went in circles. Some wanted to admit the truth and face the storm, while others demanded total secrecy. King Charles decided to take a vote among the senior family members. He thought maybe a vote would help them reach agreement, but the vote was almost evenly split. Half believed continued secrecy was the only option. They argued that admitting the truth would cause constitutional crisis. Republican movements would gain strength. The monarchy might not survive. The other half felt that keeping the secret was foolish and morally wrong. They believed betting everything on secrecy was too risky. Someone would eventually expose the truth anyway. Better to control the narrative by admitting it themselves. At least that way, they would maintain some dignity and honesty. But neither side could convince the other. The family was stuck. Private calls turned into arguments, and loyalty lines began to blur. Princess Anne stopped speaking to Prince William after a particularly harsh exchange. He had accused her of not understanding political realities. She had responded that he didn't understand historical truth. The words were harsh and hurtful. Queen Camilla and King Charles had their own confrontation. The rifts were growing wider and deeper. The stress affected everyone differently. King Charles became withdrawn. He spent hours alone in his private study, looking at portraits of ancestors, wondering which of them had known the truth. The reality haunted him. Meanwhile, Prince William threw himself into public duties. He kept his schedule packed with events and appearances, as if staying busy could somehow hold everything together. He was pushing himself too hard, barely sleeping, always tense and on edge. Princess Catherine tried to keep things normal for the children. She maintained their routines and activities, but privately, she was struggling. She had trouble sleeping. She worried constantly about what all this would mean for her children's future. They were being raised with a clear understanding of their roles and responsibilities. What happened to all that if the foundation was false? Extended family members who didn't know the full truth sensed something was wrong. They noticed tension during family gatherings. They heard bits of whispered arguments. Some began asking direct questions. It was now obvious that something was going on, and everyone was stressed. This created new problems. How much should they be told? The circle of knowledge kept expanding slowly, making the secret harder to contain. The rift within the family deepened every day. The unity that the royal family had always tried to maintain was breaking apart. Staff members noticed everything. They whispered about arguments they accidentally overheard. They talked about the cold silences during family meals. The DNA test results had created a crisis that was destroying the family from within. Relationship by relationship, conversation by conversation, until it seemed like nothing would ever be the same again. A legacy hanging by a thread. 6 weeks had passed since the first DNA test. The situation had become impossible to sustain. The secret was still officially contained, but everyone involved knew it was living on borrowed time. More journalists were asking questions every day. More staff members were noticing strange behavior. More family members were reaching their breaking points. The palace felt like a building with cracks in its foundation, still standing, but getting more unstable with each passing hour. Across Britain, public opinion was already uncertain, and now these experts were adding to the doubts. Opinion polls showed declining support for the monarchy. The numbers weren't as bad as yet, but the trend was worrying. Young people especially were questioning whether Britain still needed a royal family. Republican movements, which wanted to abolish the monarchy, saw an opportunity. The timing was terrible for the royal family. Inside the palace, King Charles made a difficult decision. He needed legal advice, but he couldn't ask directly about the real situation. So he contacted a constitutional lawyer and asked a hypothetical question. He asked what would happen if it were discovered that the royal bloodline wasn't what official records claimed. The lawyer paused for a long time before answering. The question itself was so unusual that it raised immediate concerns. The lawyer's answer was complicated and deeply disturbing. Legally, the situation would be unprecedented. There were no clear laws covering this possibility. Parliament might need to pass special legislation. The legitimacy of Charles's reign could be challenged in courts. People might argue that he had no right to be king. The entire constitutional arrangement between monarchy and parliament might need to be re-examined. The lawyer spoke carefully, but Charles could hear the alarm in his voice. The lawyer also pointed out something else. Succession had been defined by various laws over the centuries. In some ways, legitimacy came from law and tradition, not purely from biology. But the lawyer admitted that this legal argument wouldn't matter much to ordinary people. If the public learned that the royal family had hidden the truth about their bloodline, the sense of betrayal would be overwhelming. Legal technicalities wouldn't change how people felt about being deceived. As the truth lingered in shadows, the monarchy faced its most uncertain hour. King Charles replayed the conversation with the lawyer over and over in his mind. Every option seemed bad. Reveal the truth and face immediate crisis. Keep hiding it and risk worse crisis when inevitably exposed. There was no good choice. He kept hoping that somehow a solution would appear, that the secret would stay buried for a longer time. But hoping wasn't a plan. Prince William began developing a specific plan for controlled disclosure. He wanted to work with one trusted journalist, tell the story through someone who would present it fairly, provide full context and historical explanation to soften the impact, shape the narrative before hostile media could. He believed they could minimize the damage if they controlled how the story was told. If they were honest and open, perhaps people would appreciate that more than if they were exposed by enemies. But this plan required agreement from everyone in the family, and that agreement didn't exist. Every time William brought up his plan, arguments started again. Some family members absolutely refused to even consider voluntary disclosure. They believed it would be the end for the monarchy. Others thought William's plan might work, but worried about the timing. The debates went in circles, reaching no conclusion. Public trust wavered. People began to notice all the strange things that had been happening. Unexplained tensions during public appearances, unusual security measures, changes in normal procedures. The conclusion was that something significant was happening behind palace walls, though they didn't know what. They started looking for inconsistencies. Some of them began finding small things that didn't quite add up. The royal image stood fragile. One more revelation, and centuries of legacy could fall apart. Princess Anne told King Charles bluntly that they were in an impossible position. Either choice led to crisis. If they disclosed the truth voluntarily, they would face enormous backlash. People would be angry and feel betrayed. But if they kept hiding it and were eventually exposed, the backlash would be 10 times worse. The cover-up would be seen as worse than the original problem. At least voluntary disclosure offered some honesty and dignity. The breaking point came when the aide that Camilla had involved for the beginning resigned suddenly. She had worked for the family for years. She was loyal and dedicated, but she told King Charles in a private meeting that she could no longer participate in the deception. She promised not to speak to journalists. She wouldn't betray the family's trust, but she couldn't continue working there while carrying this secret. It went against everything she believed in. Her resignation was a warning sign that the structure was collapsing from within. Charles tried to convince her to stay, but she refused. She left the palace that same day, taking very few personal belongings, wanting to get out quickly. Her departure raised immediate questions among other staff members. Why would someone so loyal leave so suddenly? Someone had definitely happened. The speculation grew, adding to the general atmosphere of crisis. Late one night, King Charles stood alone in the library. It was the same room where Camilla had looked at old photographs and started having doubts. He thought about his mother, Queen Elizabeth, and what she would have done. Would she have ordered the DNA test in the first place? If she had learned this truth, would she have revealed it or protected it? He would never know. Perhaps that was the real curse of the situation. The previous generation had left them with consequences, but no guidance. The monarchy had survived wars, scandals, and revolutions across 1,000 years. It had adapted to changing times. It had overcome challenges that seemed impossible, but now it faced something different, a truth that questioned the very foundation of its existence. Not its behavior or its policies, but its right to exist at all. The information was simple, just genetic data in a report. But the implications were vast and potentially devastating. King Charles knew that a decision could not be postponed much longer. Every day of delay made the situation worse. The legacy was hanging by a thread that was stretching thinner with each passing moment. Soon it would break one way or another. The only question remaining was whether they would cut it themselves with some dignity and control, or wait for someone else to cut it for them while they watched. The choice was difficult, but it had to be made soon, and whoever made it would bear the responsibility for whatever came next. Do you think the late Queen Elizabeth would have known about the issue and decided to conceal it? Let us know your views in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe to this channel. Before you go, watch the other videos on your